Riding the rotation, fantasy managers had to figure out a way to deal with all of these midweek matches that had some interesting lineups from Major League Rugby teams. We break down all of the chaos that happened over the course of the past week, plus the fantasy top performers, waiver wire breakdown, and much more. The Fantasy Ruckers Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode 153 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of making fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. With you each and every single week, I am, of course, Ryan Yee. Matt Yee is here with me. Vandy doing family things. He's a family man, he got reeled into swim lesson duty. To take good old Louis to the swimming pool to make sure that he knows how to handle himself in the water.
Yeah, it sounds like he's just avoiding the show because his team put up a dud on the weekend. That's for sure.
That is true. Would you say, Maddie, you taught him a lesson this week?
Well, I'm constantly teaching him lessons, so it's hard to really differentiate when I am. I guess it's hard to tell when I'm not teaching him a lesson.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. For those of you who are listening, in our listener league, Matt Yee, Devin Vanderpool going head to head. You could probably guess, based on the tone of this conversation, how that outcome went. But of course, we will break down on how we got to that outcome in this jam-packed episode that includes a whole breakdown of everything that went down over the course of the past week. It feels like it's been hectic because we've had these midweek matches that have been nonstop for the past couple of weeks. We had another one this past week. So of course, we will break all of those down, get everybody caught up. And it doesn't stop there because we're going to have a handful of, maybe not in the next handful of days, but right into next week. We got some Monday, Tuesday matches going. So you get a little bit of a breather here. But hey, talk about the rotation of players that we saw over the course of the past handful of days, making it, I think, as hard as it gets for fantasy managers over the course of the past 2 weeks. You talk about planning your lineups, waiver wire pickups. The worst, you throw in how basically every single match was a Sunday match this weekend. You had the lone Friday match, and you had no idea what the lineups were going to be. You were basically hedging your bets on who you're going to slot in this lineups in. I can tell you, a handful of managers were scrambling to try to figure out who the heck they were going to start this week.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll get into it when we talk about the games, but definitely these midweek games are lending to interesting results and interesting matches. So we'll get into that a little bit more later on. But hey, we love excitement in this league. We love parity, and we're seeing that on full display this year.
Yeah, no kidding. But again, like I said, we'll break down all of those matches, of course, give you the latest news and notes from around the league, plus an update to all that is happening in our Fantasy Ruckers leagues, give you a little bit of a waiver wire breakdown, look ahead to what's to come in this exciting week. What are we already in here, Maddie? We're already heading into week
13,
which is nuts to think about. Yeah, I cannot believe that we're already in week 13. Did you know that there's only 2 weeks left in the regular season, including this one for fantasy here?
Well, you know what? I didn't know because, all our teams are not really worried about not being in a playoff spot. So
getting a little bit dicey for me in the listener league, but either way, it is good fun here in the tail end stretch. So of course, again, give you some waiver wire options as we break that down, and then look ahead to this week 13 that is coming up here, and talk a little bit of money that is picking some nice little cash cows here, because we found a couple sneaky picks here these past couple of weeks. This one was a little bit tougher, but we'll break that all down here coming up. But hey, no more time to waste. Let's get into it. Follow us at the Fantasy Ruckers, handles up above if you're watching on the YouTube video, down below in the description if you're listening on the pod. Give a like, subscribe, hit that bell to get notified. Weekly episodes coming out, always good content. Join our Discord community, linked to that down below. Fun bunch over there that loves to chat Major League Rugby, rugby as a whole, fantasy, MLR, all that good stuff. And of course, check out thefantasyruckers.com, the official platform for the Fantasy Ruckers show. Let's hop right into it.
News dump.
All right, it is our TFR news dump heading into week 13, recapping everything that went down in week 12. Fugazi is the word to use when it comes to the MLR trade deadline, because according to all the sources, the trade deadline was supposed to be last Monday, but we did get a trickling effect of some, you did say that, of some trades that happened here over the course of the last handful of days. I believe announced on May 2nd, which, if I'm doing the math correctly, was Thursday. Maybe it's those, you know, in like the NHL trade deadline or like the NBA trade deadline where you get these deals that happen a few hours after the fact. Maybe MLR just has a little bit more of a lag, you know? Maybe it comes down the wire here a couple days later. Either way, San Diego announcing that they have received salary cap considerations for 2025. Never too late in the season to make a little bit of bank in exchange for Alejandro Pradillo, who is a notable name in Major League Rugby because he was the first Mexican player in the league. The front rower now finds himself to the Big Easy, heading to New Orleans to bolster up that NOLA Gold pack.
Yeah. I don't know. Salary cap considerations. What does it mean? We'll continue to ask those hard-hitting questions.
That is true. But that is not the only move that happened. No more trades. So I guess only one post-deadline trade announced that I saw. Who knows? Maybe we see a couple more here a week later. But there was an announcement last week with Utah making a signing of Nolan Tuamohiloa.
Nice.
Close. Back three signing with Utah for the rest of the 2025 year. It's a guy that has made appearances in Major League Rugby. He then had a little stop in some sevens action, both in PR sevens and with the USA sevens program. He was actually signed by Utah, I believe, back in the 2019 season and played for Rugby Atlanta in 2022. But he now finds himself back with the Utah Warriors, and he did have an appearance this past weekend, starting for the squad. We'll get into it, obviously, in what was a interesting Utah squad in a jam-packed week for them, with like the episode title of this show is called Riding the Rotation. That was one of those rotational players that definitely took advantage of some players that needed some rest here in a busy week.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll get into some of these lineups and what they look like.
All right, just a couple fun things to talk about. Got some unique jerseys coming out now at this time of the season. San Diego wore an interesting kind of black and white thing. I don't know how to describe it going on. I liked it. It made it hard and miserable in my life to pick out players and when it comes to their numbers, but I thought it was unique. I thought it looked cool.
Yeah, well, I actually had another word. I was going to say unoriginal, but yeah.
What makes it unoriginal?
I don't know, just the black and white combo. I feel like they could have done something better. We've seen San Diego do some interesting and creative things in the past, and this year, them specifically, it seems like they just mailed it in, and we might be able to say the same with their team play.
The New England Free Jacks, though, wearing their city jerseys this coming weekend on Saturday.
So cool how Ben Lesage was took the pictures, did the photo shoot in front of, I guess, I don't know whatever that building is in Quincy. I'm sure it's some historical thing or something to do with tea. But Ben Lesage stitches on his eyes above his eyebrow, taking pictures for the camera. What a guy.
Yeah, 400 years of history. The City of Presidents is what they call it. Celebrates its 400th birthday this year. So on May 10th, they'll be wearing their Quincy 400 City jersey. It looks pretty cool. I do like it. It makes it even a little bit more badass that Ben Lesage, stitches and all, is rocking that jersey for the team to give us a sneak peek on how they look as well. Lastly here, big announcement. The first game of the season that will be airing on ESPN2 happens this weekend. Houston, San Diego will be appearing on ESPN2, the biggest landmark, I guess, channel of the year. per se, because, when there were the broadcasting rights with Fox, we would see occasional appearances of FS1, FS2 for these MLR games. Now on ESPN this season, obviously it's been on ESPN Plus for the whole majority of the year, but now ESPN2 here for this round 13 matchup between Houston and San Diego. A pretty good one to give some folks some access to some MLR action here on the, I guess, secondary main channel.
Yeah, I mean, hey, at least it's not, ESPN. I don't even know, like ESPN News or whatever the heck that is.
Yeah.
ESPN2. It's pretty good. I don't mind that.
There you go. All right. That is about it all. Maddie, is your sources telling you anything?
No, the sources are not telling me nothing this week. So,
all right, well, let's get right on to.
I guess there must be some sort of blocker or a price to pay on news that is traveling across the border.
All right, well, let's Maddie being in Canada, I guess, we won't get into it. There's a price to pay on some of those news, I guess, that you're getting. But all right, let's move on here to a little bit of an update for our fantasy Ruckers leagues. All right, hear ye, hear ye. Here is Supreme Commissioner Yi with a Fantasy Ruckers Leagues update. We always start off this segment. It is obviously my favorite every single week, talking about the weekly challenge, because, I love playing this weekly challenge. And look at me go. We're moving up. Second place finish this week. Not too bad. Moving up in the rankings. I think I am now, eighth on the year so far. So we're in the single digits. Maddie, you finished sixth, but you still have the overall total in first, ahead of the Fantasy Ruckers team by about 75. By about 75, which is pretty incredible. But shout out to this week's weekly challenge winner, Slow and Steady, Stephen Lowen, our community moderator, 42.8 fantasy points this week with his lineup, edging me out by less than 3 points. So close one there for my second win of the year. But either way, congrats to Stephen Lowen. A couple other housekeeping things that we need to take care of here as we trudge on to the final 2 weeks of the Fantasy MLR regular season. Check eligibility. We say that each and every week. I think there's going to be more and more of that coming down the wire here as we see some of these faces and names playing in positions that you don't typically see them in. So that is one thing to check out. The other thing is continue to look out for a big time announcement from the boys coming up here in a little bit. Obviously, we talked about it a little bit last week. They announced that Rhode Island is going to be the host city of the Major League Rugby final in 2025, and there's some stuff brewing, is all I'm going to say. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. We'd love to meet some of you folks out there. So stay tuned for some more details and news about that. But more and more exciting things are coming into the framework here for what the TFR show, plus some other friends of the show, have planned here for the MLR Championship. Lastly, we mentioned at the top, Monday Night Rugby, it does get included in this Fantasy MLR week. So, hey, it's going to be a little bit of a delay for some of those results coming out. We didn't include midweek games this season into our Fantasy MLR fold, but Monday night will count. Monday night's matchup is between the Utah Warriors and Seattle Seawolves. So, again, a little bit of an extended Week 13 that we have here. Again, second last regular season week before the playoffs. Pretty crazy to think about that. And in this second last week, we have a Monday night matchup. So again, reminder to all fantasy MLR managers, Utah and Seattle's matchup on Monday will count towards week 13's matchups, this week's matchup. So plan accordingly here coming up. All right, let's get right into it. No time to waste. Let's break down this crazy week 12 that was.
Quick Tap Recap.
All right, TFR, Quick Tap Recap. Week 12 on bye, Anthem Rugby Carolina. We'll get a quick reaction here, Maddie, but we had our week kickoff from an MLR sense between the Utah Warriors and San Diego Legion. The Utah Warriors putting out a pretty strong side. San Diego maybe a secondary side almost, with a few notable names mixed in there. 38-31 victory for Utah, a big time win for them that had them heading into the weekend as leaders in the Western Conference.
Yeah. I mean, hey, Utah, we were talking about it in the last show of where Utah would decide to put their, I guess, put their money and where they would want to get that win, what they valued more. And it was clear that this midweek game against San Diego, the in-conference matchup, was something that they thought that they needed to get a win. Um, and they put out a pretty strong lineup for that game.
Yeah, yeah. So again, 38-31 victory for Utah and what was a scorcher, fun match to watch. But again, not fantasy relevant. So let's talk about some of the fantasy relevant games. And it started off on Friday, 10:30 Eastern time. The Seattle Seawolves go head to head against RFC Los Angeles, the bottom of the Western Conference, going head to head for bragging rights of who can maybe inch themselves closer to a playoff spot.
And neither of them were able to brag.
And neither of them were able to brag. Exactly. A 26-26 tie thanks to a missed kick by who took the kick? Who do I say?
Reese? Or was it on
Yeah,
the
I think
Seattle
it was
side?
Reese. It was Reese. No,
Yeah.
no, no, no. It was not Reese. It was not Reese. Oh, who was it? Oh, Gonzalo. I'm pretty sure Gonzalo
Okay.
Bertrand took it. So misses it. Ends up in a tie, 26-26. Before we get into, I guess, fantasy performances here in this one, back and forth affair between these two teams. But I just want to say, as a guy that has been very high on the LA squad this season, LA lost this one, I feel like, because LA, again, it's kind of been a theme of their squad this year. Obviously, they have the name talent with guys like Christian Leolifano, guys like Andrew Coe, guys like Billy Meeks.
Reese
But
McDonald.
they make mistakes and they don't stay disciplined. And Seattle cashed in when they were on the double yellow, I believe, and ends up in the tie here. And in a game where they dominated when they were even strength and they were clearly the better team, they made mistakes at crucial times and ends up in a tie. You're not going to go far in this league if that's the case. And it seems like that has been the theme for LA all far. I think they threw up the stat. I think at one point in the game, it might have been early on in the match, but the possession at one point was like 85 to 14%, 85 to 15%. And RFC wasn't doing anything with that. And it ends up in a probably a very, very annoying tie here between the Seattle Seawolves and RFC LA, who are now shared with the same record at the bottom of the Western Conference.
Yeah. And I mean, like, Seattle is improving like in comparison to kind of
Mm-hmm.
what they had earlier in the year. I think
Mm-hmm.
some of this is coming off the back of a really improved play from Rodney Iona. You're seeing guys like Devon Rousseau, who is already in form, but maybe more so guys like Duncan Matthews, who are coming back and regularly starting and being
Mm-hmm.
impact guys for this squad. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's a tough one for LA. I feel like LA really needed that win. As you said, Ryan, at the earlier the show, we're getting close to this. We're in round 13. I think we're 6 rounds away from the from playoffs. So in the MLR playoffs. So yeah, teams have to start figuring it out, especially these teams that are at the bottom of the table.
Yeah. So obviously one that hurts quite a bit here for RFCLA. Again, mistakes costing them. And that's been a theme of that this year. But talking about fantasy performances, let's move on to Seattle here to start off with. You mentioned him. There seems to be some key guys that are really stepping up for this squad that has made Seattle seem
Yeah.
at least a little bit closer to what we expected of Seattle heading into this year and what we've seen in the past. Devon Rousseau has been the main staple of that.
Yep.
18.8 fantasy points on this match here with a 65 meters gained, a try. He now has 3 tries in the past 4 matches. He has tries in back-to-back matches. He has 11 tackles, a try assist. He was a crucial aspect of the success that we've been seeing from Seattle so far this year. Then you throw in Duncan Matthews, who has been obviously a guy that's been fantasy relevant before, maybe not so much last year, but now puts up his 6th straight double-digit fantasy point performance, backs it up with 14 fantasy points, 59 meters gained, a try, 2 try assists in the full 80 that he played. Like, Duncan and Devon Rousseau are the heartbeat of this backline right now and are making them look successful.
Yeah, and like Duncan Matthews is like last year, it was really difficult. One, he was in and out of the lineup, but he also just wasn't as He just didn't look as elusive in space. But this year, like it looks like the 2 years ago, the 3 years ago, Duncan Matthews were just in space. He is just an absolute weapon. Um, yeah, and he's just, a meters gain merchant and can even chase down a grubber or two off the backs of Devon Rousseau.
Is this the best lineup for Seattle? I know Devon Rousseau, we've historically said on this show from a fantasy perspective, we'd like to see him at the fullback position, but from a Seattle sense, it looks like they're having a lot of success here with Rodney Iona there at the 10 position. You have Dan Creel, who you could argue from a fantasy sense, obviously is not having that great of a year, but then you put Devon Rousseau at the 13, Duncan Matthews at the 15, rather than maybe putting, a Fouché in there or having some of these other guys in that lineup. It seems like that this combination, especially with the improved play of Rodney Iona, like you mentioned, Maddie, seems to be working for Seattle, at least at this point.
Yeah, I mean, look, like Devon Rousseau as a guy is the prime example of utility back. He can fit in the centers, he can fit on the wings if he really needed to, but he can really fit in at fullback. I think for me, Duncan Matthews, it's more so of a where does Duncan Matthews play best? Duncan Matthews is the best out in that fullback position. Devon Rousseau for me, and Dan Creel, even though the fantasy numbers don't say it, Devon Rousseau and Dan Creel, they will continue to be one of the best center pairings in the MLR.
Yeah, Devon Rousseau right now, 12 weeks into this season, fantasy season, I should say, is our fantasy player number one by about
surprised.
6 fantasy points, which is pretty crazy. All right, other guys here to just of note between on Seattle sides of things. Deval Kotza, 11.8 for him. Good to see him in his first start since round 11. Gets his best fantasy point total of the year at 11.8. This is a guy that on Dallas Jackals last year was a fantasy MLR machine. Obviously, a large part due to him not playing as much or getting that feature role here with Seattle with Karan Van Vuren there. Dewalt Kotza, though, takes advantage here against LA. And then the last guy I want to mention is Malachi Esdale from the Seattle side of things. Like, what a try that he scored.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like, every time he gets on, he plays 30 minutes, he plays 20 minutes, he plays 10 minutes. He finds a way to score. I think he scored what? Like, if we take a look, like every time he's come off the bench,
6 tries. He scored 6 tries this year. 2 of them, he started 2 matches this year. Yeah. In both those matches that he started, he scored a try. So let's take those out. That means that guy has scored out of the 8 matches that he's come off the bench. He scored in 50% of them.
Yeah, it's impressive. That's for sure. Just the way that he's able to make an impact, and the way that he's able to really just create something out of nothing. Almost, it seems like with every try he scores.
You can see the sevens kind of inspiration in there. You know what I mean? Like, even in the try that he scored over the past weekend, like when he hit that gap, like he was gone. The Jets were turned on and he was flying, and obviously scoring off of that and obviously cashing in for fantasy managers. Not too sure how many fantasy managers have him in the lineup, but either way, Malachi Esdale continues to find a way to score tries. Again, his 6th of the year. Just quickly touching on some LA guys. Rory Van Voot was the highest scorer on the LA side of things, 11.9. Again, nothing too crazy from the LA side of things. And then Billy Meeks, from a fantasy sense, is fine. I mean, he scored 5 tries now in 5 straight games, which is pretty impressive. Yeah. But I will say from a non-fantasy sense, there were just some very key turnovers that he had at really, really crucial times that just those are the small mistakes that shoots RFCLA in the foot. Like, just errant passes that get intercepted that you don't need to make that one extra offload, a knock on here and there in crucial positions. I believe, if I remember correctly, there was at least 2 that I remember really vividly. Was a knock on within the 22 in the first half, and then I believe an intercepted pass in the second half in the opposing 22 again. So again, Billy Meeks, fantasy sense, completely fine. I'm still starting him each and every week, but you expect more out of a guy that obviously has the experience and has been one of the best players in the MLR so far this season. I will mention him because we did talk about him. Rodney Iona, 9.4 fantasy points. He now has at least, I should add, he has 12 made conversion kicks in the past 4 weeks, 4 penalties.
Picking it up.
picking it up, pretty consistent, is going to get you 9 to 12 fantasy points each and every week. All right, let's move on to the next matchup here, Maddie. Let's talk a little bit about now these flurry of Sunday matches. We started off with 2 p.m. matches. Let's start off with, since Vandy's not here, our in-house Utah Warriors fan, let's start off with the Free Jacks Houston Sabercats matchup. How do you want to describe this one? A butt whooping off the get-go, because New England they turned on all the jets right off the top. Once Houston started to get back into it, it was just way too late, especially with the rain coming down there towards the second half. They made a statement early. They put the pedal down and they didn't look back. They win this one 36-17.
Yeah, and an interesting lineup decision. I mean, putting Max Schumacher at 10 and having AJ Alatimo off the bench. Not sure how much that necessarily contributed to kind of the slow start for this Houston side. But look, like New England Free Jacks showing that they can beat top sides. And more importantly, Paula Balakena showing that he is not a fluke this year. And he's willing to put up a lot of points. And he will get the ball in the try zone. And we're looking at kind of the way that he's gone the last 3 games, or last 3 starts that he's had for this team: 28.9 fantasy points, 12.9 fantasy points, 17.3 fantasy points, and 4 tries in 3 games. I mean, they got to be happy that he's finding his form.
Yeah, no kidding whatsoever here. I mean, just a guy, you mentioned it, 4 tries in the past 3 matches, 7 tries in the past 5 matches. Does it again. It's his third multi-try performance of the year, which is crazy.
Almost as good as Joe Mano.
Yeah, almost as good as Joe Mano. But even then, this is what you get from some back 3 players. When they're on, it seems like they're on. And Paula Balakena is one of those guys. 17.3 fantasy points this past week. Yeah, I mean, I guess the fantasy numbers really just describe it itself, right? This butt whooping. I mean, Dan Hollinshead, even when he comes in at the 10 position, his second 10 start of the year, obviously the injury to Putros has kind of have found him in a crucial spot here for the Free Jacks, but he seems to be picking up pretty solid. Yep. And maybe these are the numbers that Matt McCarthy of Rugby Wrap-Up was looking for when he drafted him in the first round a year ago. But he puts up another double-digit fantasy point performance. 4 conversion kicks made, a penalty kick. Dan Hollinshead's making you a little sneezy, huh?
Yeah. Oh, these the spring allergies coming in. So almost have to there for Dan Hollinshead. You brought up what's his name, Matt McCarthy, and I don't know. It's just a bodily reaction.
Gives you the itchy nose. Gives you the allergies.
The itchy nose. That's for sure.
11.2 for him. Dan Hollinshead's look good.
Yeah, like you said, Ryan. I mean, Dan Hollinshead, whoever was able to pick him up off the waiver wire, you're clearly reaping the rewards there. I guess also with that injury, I'm assuming Harrison Boyle's also injured as well. So Dan Hollinshead, they needed him. They picked him up. He's coming in. He's performing, an experienced guy. I don't think we're too surprised there. But yeah, like you said, Ryan, like a lot of guys, you look at a guy like Jack Reeves, 9.3 fantasy points with a try. LaRue Milan with 8.7 fantasy points. Joe Johnston with 8.6 fantasy points. Not the usual guys that you would necessarily see at the top of the leaderboard in terms of fantasy points scored for this New England Free Jack side, but they are there and they're scoring.
And this is what makes the Free Jacks scary, right? We counted them out, right, a handful of weeks ago, and we just were not impressed with their play. And here they are at the top of the Eastern Conference, 2 points ahead of the Chicago Hounds, who everyone was in. I mean, this is just what New England does, and this is where New England gets scary.
Look, it just happened that Chicago's going on they were on a bit of a losing streak, and New England Free Jacks took that personally and said, like, I'm sorry, but this is what you got to do to be at the top of the table. And they're showing their experience here.
On the Houston side of things, Drew Wild was the best Houston Sabercats performer here. 11.8 fantasy points, scores the try, 49 meters gained, plus 1 conversion kick there. He was probably the lone highlight spot of this. Maybe you could throw in Dom McKenna in there, who had a 9.9 fantasy point performance in there as well for the Houston Sabercats. No team of the week honorees in this one. I should mention, did not mention it when we were talking about the RFC LA Seattle game, but Jason Dom for second row, and Devon Rousseau, of course, who we talked about, 18.8 points were our team of the week honorees in the previous game. But as for this match, no team of the week honorees, but Paula Bella kind of was your highest performer by far, 17.3 fantasy points. All right, let's move on to the other 2 p.m. game now here. Old Glory DC versus the Utah Warriors. Where do I begin with this one? Messy is probably the way to describe it. I was on the Glorious Rugby podcast last week with Alistair Kirschpool, and we actually got to talk one-on-one with head coach Simon Cross. And him going into this match, he talked about the importance of not giving teams turnovers, and they've been very, very kind of messy in that sense of the game. They feel like they've been solid when they have the ball in hand, but they've just been making mistakes that have been kind of giving the ball to their side. He emphasized against a team like Utah, this is something that they were not going to be able to do.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, though, they didn't know that, mind you, in a lineup that probably wasn't their, or it wasn't their starting tier lineup, the Utah Warriors find a way to out OGDC in having more turnovers than them. And that was like the definition of the first half. Like, I mean, I don't know what the possession numbers were, but it felt like Utah never had the ball in that first half.
Yeah. I mean, look, like the minute you saw the Utah lineup come out for this game, you started to get a little bit concerned, and you started to kind of see Old Glory DC's chance of getting a win here. You see that Damian Hoyland's back in the lineup. And he's going to be a big factor for this team, and they haven't had him for the past couple of weeks. And, he comes in and makes an impact, maybe not fantasy-wise, but in terms of just having him there, he makes an impact. And yeah, Old Glory DC, they really got off to a hot start. They never looked back, and Utah was just never really able to catch up.
The one highlight, I guess, maybe for this Utah Warriors team, and I'm sad that Vandy is not here to kind of talk about it because I know he would be boasting about it, but was the Fred Apulu try where he just turned on the Jets on the wing, the replacement prop going in there, and just probably has never ran faster in his life. They're running on the side, but a nice little try there by the big man coming in. But from a fantasy sense, on Utah side of things, if this is a game that you were looking to bank on some guys here, you weren't getting it. Utah, their highest point scorer was Joel Hodgson at 8.2 fantasy points. Not terrible. Joel Hodgson, it's been kind of iffy. Like, I get it. He's 100% owned. At this point, are you thinking about benching him? Especially with the kicking duties that D'Angelo Leila usually takes. I mean, he had the kicking duties in this one, but they just didn't score. But, like, I guess the point being, like, would you rather start Dan Hollinshead or Joel Hodgson right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, like the issue with having a fly half that isn't taking kicks is that you're having to kind of you're kind of having to make a back three or center position decision based on, hey, I need another guy who can kick. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a guy that's also as productive as guys like Devon Rousseau, guys like Duncan Matthews, Paula Balakina, and stuff like that. So it's tough. It's tough on this one. I personally, I think there's definitely better 10s out there, especially one that's got the kicking duties. But it's really tough to leave Joel Hodgson on your bench.
Yeah. Hasn't scored a double-digit fantasy point performance since the scorcher of a week in round 6 when he scored 26.6 fantasy points. His highest since then was this match, was round 11 with 9.7. Again, scored 8.2 here against Old Glory DC. But enough talking about Utah. Let's talk about the DC side of things, who again, they cashed in. They took advantage of a weakened lineup. They minimized the turnovers, at least to a point that it wasn't as bad as Utah. Perry Humphreys has looked excellent the past handful of weeks, has now scored a try in 2 of the last 3 matches. He has his second highest performance of the year at 18.7. The first time he's reached triple digit meters gained at 122. He now has 5 tries on the season. Perry Humphreys looking solid right now.
Yeah, and it's just like, I don't know. He reminds me of like the Xavier Mignot type where it's just streaky. So that's why his roster own is 29% probably. But you look at him as like, if you're in a pinch, he's a guy that you might be able to throw in, and you're just kind of hoping for a high ceiling 14, 15 point week from him. So Yeah, he really goes with, as long as Old Glory DC does well, and you kind of look at the trends there. If Old Glory DC does well, he often is on the back of that offense and finishing the plays.
John Rizzo, his back three mate, also having a pretty solid game. 44
Yep.
meters gained, a try scored 17.5 fantasy points. No other double-digit fantasy point scores in this one. I will say Jason Emery, though, 8.3 fantasy points, conversion kick, 2 penalty kicks. If you scoop them off waiver wire, like he's doing adequately, right? Like he's a guy that if you had a Putros and now you don't have him, like you know he's going to kick. You know he's going to play the full 80. He's not going to do much else than that, but he's going to score you around 6 to 8 fantasy points each and every week at your fly hat position.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Ryan, a guy I do want to shout out for Old Glory DC, Tavita Nakali. I mean, the last 3 weeks, nothing flash, but second rows, you don't expect too much. But 12 points, 4.5 points, 7.5 points in just the past week, and has scored 2 tries in 3 matches. And from a second row, I mean, there's not much more you can ask for than that.
I don't want to say I called it, but I kind of called it. Had him as our second row streamer there in the Fantasy Ruckers show that has us rolling right now in the Fantasy Ruckers OG League. All right, let's move on to the next matchup here. Chicago Hounds versus Miami Sharks. Not much to talk about in what was a weather-ridden game. Wet, but again, you add on top of that Chicago's play style, Miami not being able to do much. Chicago takes this one 14-7. There wasn't a try scored, I believe. Was there not a try scored in the first half? Or maybe it was like in the extra time of the first half?
Yeah,
like did Miami go with 7-0 or something? But yeah, there wasn't a try.
I almost had this one right. I almost called it. I was like, hey, Miami can pull a win off here. And I guess the Mother Nature just said no.
Yeah. So, I mean, fantasy sense, your try scores are obviously going to be the guys that kind of come up in this one. Luke White, 14.2 fantasy points in a solid performance by him off the bench. Yep. 39 meters gained, a try scored there. Dylan Fawcett, the Butcher, cashing in again on a very, very good Chicago set piece. Your highest Miami scorer was Ronan Foley, who decided to just be a tackle machine for his tackle high of 19 with 46 meters gained, so 12.8 points for him. But in a game that has 14-7 score, you're not going to have any team of the week on reads. You're not going to have many fantasy point scorers. This is one you probably didn't want many assets of in this one. Not much else to be said. Again, weather really dampered this one, and Chicago got done what they had to get done and squeaked out a win. And I feel like this is how we're going to get it, whether they play a crappy team or a good team. Chicago is never going to win a matchup, rain or shine, by any more than, let's say, 10 points.
I mean, hey, there's something very talented about a team that can just control the game.
That's true. And that's what they do.
That's what they do.
That's what they do. All right, let's talk about the most exciting matchup of the weekend, because this one was a scorcher. It is obviously going to be evident when you have 6 of your team of the week honorees in this one match in a game where there was more than 80 points scored from a game sense. San Diego NOLA back and forth. NOLA had the opportunities. They pulled ahead right at the tail end of the first half. San Diego said, you know what, we're gonna close this one out and end up being on top at the end of it. It did even rain, I think, towards the tail end of the match as well. So San Diego knows that we saw that Chicago Miami game. We're gonna still score points in this one, and it was a fun one, 45-36 for San Diego, and we'll get into it, but a whole bunch of fantasy points in this one as well.
Yeah, I mean, you watch the start, I think maybe the first 20 minutes, and you think San Diego's running away with it. Actually, I'll back up. Right, the NOLA lineup comes out, and you look at the lineup, and you think, oh god, what's happening here? Yeah. What's going on? No Jonah Moe, no JP Duplessis, no
Xavier Mignot,
Isaac Tutamaki, no Xavier Mignot.
Reese Botha was starting.
Yeah, Reese Botha, Damian Stevens was starting, and we know how I feel about Damian Stevens. He definitely made up for it here. And you think about that lineup, and you think, oh, I think San Diego's going to take this one. And you watch the first 20 minutes and they get up 21 points to 7. And you think this one's in the bag. But no, NOLA stuck around. And honestly, if anything, I'm more impressed by the fact of the way that NOLA played with this type of depth against a San Diego team that, yes, they were missing some of their starters. But you look at that lineup, like that's that's pretty much a lot of their starters, minus
Mm-hmm.
Ethan Grayson, minus Tavit Lopetti, minus Tion Lutz, as I'm naming them off. But they still had, like, Ryan James, they still had Poitevin, they still had Wilkin, they still had McClutchy, and they had Tupai in there as well, who has been their starter coming in. Yeah, crazy, but we love the high scoring game. I gotta say, I'm really impressed with the way that this NOLA team played despite the loss.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it came down the wire. Again, I saw the lineup. I wanted to smash when I saw that the line, I believe, was 7.5 on some sports books. I was like, I got to smash this as San Diego because there's no way that they don't control this game with that lineup that Nola's putting out. But again, proving us wrong. Ended up being a lot closer than that. It did cover, but either way, there were parts where I was definitely sweating. I do want to get one rant off of my chest here.
Uh-oh.
And it has to do with the TMO because that try right before the tail end of the first half, obviously so clear that there was obstruction and it should not have been a try. I guess there were communication issues that were happening.
Did they go to the cell phone?
Where, yeah, I don't know, where the refs could not get in touch with the TMO official. So they just ended up just saying, you know what, screw it. We're just going to call it the way it was and just move on. The problem I have with that is if you're going as the league, I think we're far enough with this league here, right? Where we've been around long enough where these types of issues should not be happening, right? Yeah. If you're going to implement TMO, it needs to be consistent. And if you want to get things right, if you want to get calls right, and you're going to use TMO to that advantage, let's make sure it works. And obviously that wasn't the case here, because it just ends up being certain situations you're going to have it, certain situations you're not, and it makes it very, very inconsistent, which is the worst part of it. Like it's even worse than making bad calls, because at least you're consistently making bad calls, or if you're consistently not using TMO or things like that, then at least you know what to expect. But this was just kind of, for me, it didn't sit with me right. And the fact that they're just like, all right, we're just gonna move on, we're gonna do it. The league needs to do a better job of figuring out what the heck is going on, because it's not the first time that we've had issues with TMO. Yeah. And again, I would be better off just saying, hey, if it's going to happen like this, and I get it, this was once in a long time that this has happened, let's not have it, right? Let's not have it. Let's have the refs call the game, but we can't have it half foot in, half foot out, and have it work sometimes, have it not work on. Just something I want to get off my chest, because again, I'm passionate about this league. I want to see this league grow, and it's little things like this that make or break the professionalism and the big time parts of really growing rugby here in the U.S. and North America. That being said, let's talk about some fantasy point performances, because there were a whole bunch of them in this one when it comes to two teams that put up a whole bunch of points. And we start off with Ryan James. Ryan James is our second, just behind Devon Rousseau, our fantasy player number 2 on the year. He now doesn't even need to score tries right now, but somehow he goes 168 meters gained for a season high. 8 tackles in this one for a 20.2 point performance. He actually hasn't scored since round 6 and is still the fantasy player number 2, which just goes to tell me that he's going to find the try line eventually. And if he does that, he can cement himself and push him into that spot of being the fantasy player number 1. He's not far off of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an insane season that he's having, and nobody really saw this coming. I mean, at least I didn't. I don't think you did, Rye. But yeah, we love to see it. I think these are the types of guys, the guys who are just meter eaters, as Jam DeLay would say. They just rack up the fantasy points.
Yeah. So he is our back 3 team of the week player in week 12. Our back row team of the week player also in San Diego, Christian Poitevin. I think managers who have had Christian Poitevin have been waiting for a performance like this for a while. The last time he had the double digits was in round 8 for 17.5. But in this one, he has his first 2-try performance, 2 tries, 32 meters gained, and 14 tackles. He now has 7 tries on the season, but hadn't scored since round 8. Here in round 12, he pops in 2.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note as well that I think Brad Wilkin left with some sort of injury. So his 3.6 fantasy points is obviously reflective of that. I think it's something around 3.6. But yeah, Christian Pointeman. Not much else to say. He's having a great year this year.
Hugh Roach had a fantastic game,
Yeah.
16.1 fantasy points,
Well,
two tries for him.
he benefited off the back of that Brad Wilkin injury. Shiloh Klein comes on, I believe, for Brad Wilkin,
Yeah.
and Hugh Roach gets to play a full 70 minutes and ends up scoring 2 tries. I think one of them very late in his shift, and one very early off the back of a maul. So yeah, Hugh Roach is having a year, and he looks to be the clear starter for this San Diego Legion pack.
And I'll give a shout out to you, Maddie. He was on your waiver wire not too long ago. So if you were able to cash in on him, you've been reaping the rewards. Shiloh Klein, like you mentioned, Matt, 12.8 fantasy points for him for 2 tries. He now has 3 tries in 2 matches. And then I do want to just touch on Lincoln McClutchy, because McClutchy, like, he's been great. McClutchy has been fantastic. When he's
and this
in
is like 3 weeks ago, we were worried about, hey, is this guy still a guy that you should be starting?
And just consistency off of the boot. I mean, almost like a better version of Jason Emery, almost. You know what I mean? Like a Jason Emery that's consistent is going to give you the full 80, but also has the potential to break off for a handful of meters. He has a season high in this matchup, 87 meters gained, but he now has gone 4 straight matches with double-digit fantasy point performances. 3 out of those 4 matches, he's exceeded the 40 meters gain mark, and he's hit at least 3 kicks in every single one of those matches, split between conversions and penalties. In back-to-back weeks, he's hit 4 conversions. So obviously taking advantage of San Diego, who's finding their footing on the offensive side. But Lincoln has been great.
Yeah, I mean, hey, there's a reason why he had the scoring title, I think, 2 years ago in the NPC Bunnies Cup. So he's showing that class on a team that definitely likes to score.
NOLA side of things, Cooper Coates. 133 meters gain. Yeah. First time that we've seen him start since round 6. So obviously making an impact there, playing the full 80 again, with the triple digit meters gain, gets 16.7. Testimony Tonguiha, 16.1 for him, with 2 tries that he scored. He looked pretty monstrous on some of those beastly tries. And then Harley Wheeler, 14.9. Reese Botha at the fly half start we haven't seen him since round 6, gets 14.1 with the try he scored, 3 conversion kicks and 51 meters gain.
Yeah, and I'll shout out also Villamoni Karoy, a guy who we were pretty excited about in the offseason. He finally makes an appearance off the bench and scores exactly 0 fantasy points in 10 minutes played. But is this a sign that we'll see him more? I don't know. Tough fullback room. Cooper Coates obviously looks good coming back. We have Julian Roberts that obviously has been looking good. Cooper Coates, man, I think he's the surprise for me. He continues to play well every time he gets that start and gets the call.
Yeah. We'll talk about Croy more in the waiver wire breakdown. But yeah, it is a deep room there. But I did want to mention that we did see a Villamoni Karoy. He is around. He is in NOLA. That is in fact.
He's not scoring fantasy points, but he's there.
So again, Reese Botha, fly half of the week at 14.1. Let's give a shout out to Damian Stevens, because with 3 try assists, also puts on the Jets there for that beautiful try. For 13.7 fantasy points for him in his first start of the year. Got to give him his flowers, as he is our scrum half team of the week. San Diego also, I believe with 3 try assists from their defensive set piece. I believe 1 off the scrum, 2 off the maul. They get 7 fantasy points as their defensive set piece team of the week. Yeah. Most exciting matchup. San Diego wins, and now they find themselves second in the West. Pretty incredible stuff.
I was going to say, kind of weird week this week. I mean, fantasy managers probably felt it, but just low scoring in fantasy points wise across all the teams except this one last matchup. So yeah, it was an interesting one. Not what we like as fantasy managers, but hey, it was an exciting week. A lot of interesting results. Yeah,
only 120 plus fantasy point performer in Ryan James. Everyone else below that. But again, I think that's evident by our team of the week honorees dishing out. Only had 2 matches with team of the week honorees in this one. So again, let's pump the points back up here and spread the love here. I know, I get it. We're riding the rotation, but in a week that we have no midweek matches, we'll see. We'll see whether or not we can hop back up into a whole bunch of fantasy point scoring. I think our community moderator did the math, and we only had 1 triple digit fantasy team this week, all coming off of a week where I think the week before we had like 3 or 4. So we love points. All right, let's talk about some of those guys that may be getting you those points here that you can look at here coming up in week 13.
Waiver Wire Breakdown.
All right, time for our Week 13 TFR waiver wire breakdown. We'll go through each position, giving you guys some options of who you guys can pick up. Based on the way the week plays out, you can treat Old Glory DC as being on the bye. They do not play this weekend, and I believe don't play until Tuesday. So from a fantasy sense, does not count here for our Week 13 matchups. So let's start off here, Matt. I'm going to start off with front row. What is it called when I try to give advice and people do the opposite? When I mean the opposite, I mean like literally, I suggested Ben Sugars last week, and he was at 29% owned going into the week, and coming into this week, he is now 14% owned. So people actually actively did the opposite of what I was trying to tell them. But
I mean,
in that situation,
maybe this will help, right? Because I think maybe we're both on the Ben Sugars train this week.
There we go. Then I love to hear it, because I'm telling the people, hey, listen to me and don't do actively the opposite. Listen to us. Exactly. Ben Sugars. I get it. He put kind of a dud this week, but he seems to be the guy that is emerging here in this LA room. When it comes to the guy that's going to be starting at the hooker position, he now, I believe, has 5 straight starts. If you take away the yellow card, he actually has a pretty adequate performance at around 5 fantasy points. And it was a gator roll. Again, one of the discipline issues that LA's facing. But again, he is getting the meters gained, and he has the ability to get double-digit tackles. So he has a lot more upside than what a lot of front row players can offer you off the waiver wire. And at only 14% owned now, definitely. If you had Vodka, Gaddis, yeah, no kidding. But Ben Sugars is my option this week.
Yeah, I like it too. He's the guy there at 14% owned. I mean, he shouldn't be 14% owned, but he is, and people need to pick him up.
Second row now. I'm going with Sam Caird. He obviously has had a season where he's been kind of injury prone, but now returns and has played 3 straight weeks and has averaged in those 3 weeks around 5 fantasy points. He's not going to get you the full 80, and again, the numbers are kind of varying here. He does have a knack to get those breakdown turnovers. He did score a try this past week, but the reason why I like him as a streamer this week is because he takes on Chicago, and the way that Chicago plays, they are the team that is requiring teams to hit the most. And if that gives me some upside, Sam Caird should get a decent number of hits this season. Remember, back in round 1, 26 tackles. Back in round 3, 19 tackles. Against Chicago, there's the potential that he could go back up there and put you at least close to a double-digit fantasy point performance.
Yeah, and I'm going to go for another guy, a San Diego Legion guy, Vili Hilu, who's just been fairly consistent over the past 3 weeks. I guess 2 weeks if you really look at the midweek game plus the weekend game. But 80 minutes in all of them, over 5 fantasy points for each one of them. Right now, he is 29% owned, and he's one of those second rows that kind of can switch into the back row and the second row kind of intermittently, which is always a plus for these second row guys. So he's my waiver wire pickup this week.
I will give an example, though. If you picked up Johan Mumsen, this is why you need to listen to us on the waiver wire, because Johan Mumsen has been playing, kind of to your point, the back row minutes there, having second row eligibility. You lost out on that now, but having that at your second row is a huge advantage. So again, kind of a testament to finding those guys that may have that upside. Moving on to back row, for me, it's a toss-up between two guys that are literally not owned by anyone. But for me, I'm going to say Jimmy Hokafanu as one option. We've seen him appear more and more with the San Diego Legion side.
Yep.
The concern with me was just that he wasn't playing the minutes required for you to be kind of an upside 8-man. But he has been playing, or he has at least in the past 3 matches, or 2 out of the 3 matches, played above 70 minutes. So it's going up there. The minutes are increasing. 43 meters gain in this past one. The try assist, double-digit tackles in 3 of the past 4 matches, and one of those being one coming off the bench. For me, a large portion why I wanted to include him was the eye test pass. Like when I watched Hokafanu in this one, I feel like he had one of his better matches of the season. And if you pair that with him playing, 70 to 80 minutes, I do like the upside that that he provides. The other guy I was going to mention was Tim Anstey, who has looked good. I think that LA backroom and the way that they play, like they are all over the park. Ben Houston, Tim Anstey, who's the third one there?
Ed Timpson, Tim
Ed
Anstey,
Timpson.
Ben Houston.
They are everywhere. Like all across the park, just the way they're playing. So the opportunity to do that. The one pause that I have with Tim Anstey, I get it. We've been waiting a long time, but we did see a Kunatani appearance again this week. Is there the emergence of him possibly getting into that starting lineup? I don't know. But Tim Anstey, if you're not worried about that, should be a pretty good pickup. And they go up against Anthem Rugby Carolina this week. So opportunity to score.
Yeah, for sure. For me, I'm gonna go with Ronan Foley. I mean, he comes off a pretty good 12.8 fantasy points week. He's played 80 minutes in the past, I guess, 3 games that he's played. And we've seen this guy do so well for fantasy managers. The one stat that I'm looking at is just double-digit tackles every time in the past 3 weeks that he's started, that he's played, which is great. So yeah, you like that type of consistency. You hope that continues. And as Miami is kind of trending upwards right now, I think he's going to continue and ride that with his fantasy performances.
Moving on to the scrum half position for me, I'm saying pick your poison, but look out for Houston Sabercats scrum half. I've heard, I believe they mentioned on the broadcast that Andre Warner is dealing with some sort of injury. Obviously didn't play this past week, and it was Jay Renton. So pick your poison. Choose your guy. Do you like Jay Renton or do you like Wandy Oliver? I think Jay Renton and his performance, I get it. Houston lost. He did look pretty okay there this past week. So, just really hedge your bet on who you think. So if you're in need of a scrum half, if you are the Ethan McVie or Connor Buckley owner and you need to stream a guy, either put a $0 waiver claim on the guy you think is going to start and then swap that out when lineups come out. But I think the Houston Sabercats 9s are the ones to target this week as streaming options. And depending on how injured Andre Warner is, maybe a guy that has long-term appeal.
Yeah, hard to argue with that one. So yeah, I mean, I personally think that Jay Renton is probably going to take that spot, just with his experience and his class. Yeah, I like Jay Renton out of the two.
Okay. Moving on to fly half, I have nothing for you. I have nothing.
Yeah, it's tough picking. The only one that I could think of is either is Dorian Jones, really. Like, I think Dorian Jones is really the starting fly half for that NOLA Gold side. And, even though he wasn't there last week, I think that he should be in that position. But then again, it's still such a toss-up and you're not really too sure. I guess maybe the one thing I'll say is that anybody who's kind of sitting on Tim's wheel, I think it's time to just let it go. Every time he's come on, he hasn't had a great game. I think Hilsenbeck has really won that job. I know we've talked highly of him, but I think that it's just too late now to continue to hold him. Like you said, right before we, like, when we were getting into it, we're like 3 or 4 rounds away from fantasy MLR playoffs, and there's no time anymore to kind of keep these guys in your lineup.
Great point. All right, center position. For me, it's a guy that I've had on my waiver wire before, but again, people are not listening. 14% owned, Isaac Tutamaki. I'm going to mention it. I think this was a week where he was getting some rest. He had been an Iron Man for this NOLA side for a while, and again, we talked about into depth last week on why his performances are getting better. I think the strongest center pairing for NOLA is Isaac Tutamaki and JP Duplessis. He's had 3 double-digit fantasy point performances. You can argue and maybe wait until you see the lineups come out to be sure about this. But again, the center options are pretty thin right now in terms of like not having, like, if you have a Nick Griggs, Stephen Hughes, any of those guys, and you're looking for a streamer, like there's not many options out there for you to choose from. And if Tamaki's going to start, I like the upside that he brings.
Yeah, and again, like, he's going to do well as long as JP Duplessis is doing well. He just feeds off of that, like we talked about last week. The guy that I will bring up is Jack Reeves. He's a guy that has come from the Premiership, has played for Gloucester, played on the wing, and we're seeing that experience on the wing here every game. The last 3 games when he started on the wing, he's got 12.5 fantasy points and 9.3 fantasy points in just 52 minutes last week. So, he's shown. I mean, he's got, out of the 1 to 6 games that he's played, 3 half of them have been over double digits, and some of them up to the season high of 25.6 fantasy points. I'd be really interested to see how he continues to play for this New England Free Jacks.
And he brings, when you have a player like that who's center eligible and is playing on the back three, like the upside is huge there, right? Like you got to bake in that there is risk involved, because obviously from the back three position, if they don't score try, typically it's not that great a performance, but you're laughing if he does. Speaking of back three though, let's move on to that. Let's start off the conversation, Maddie, just to get it out of the way, between Villamone and Karoy. Obviously we saw an appearance from him. The upside is there, super rugby experience. Like is this, and this would probably be more lended to fantasy managers who have a playoff spot solidified. Do you see a place where Karoy in the next few weeks solidifies himself in that NOLA Gold lineup and is able to bring that skill set that we have been so anxiously awaiting for to this lineup at some point with the pedigree that he has?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, I would have thought I was really dependent.
We had him in the top five.
Yeah, we did. But look, he's not going to get there, and that's fine. He hasn't played. And I was hoping that maybe they would give him a bit more opportunity this game, like more than 10 minutes. But Cooper Coates was having a game, and Karoy just didn't have the need to come on. I think it's going to be really tough to spend waiver capital unless you really just have the space to keep him on your squad until he actually is in the lineup and starting a game. He's one of those guys that until you see him in the lineup, I don't think you're picking him up. Until you see him starting in the lineup. And that's tough.
Yeah.
Like you're looking at the competition with Cooper Coates, who's played well every time he's come on. Julian Roberts, who's also played well every time he started. You got to think, like, where does Karoy sit within this lineup that they have?
And that's what worries me too, is like it would be a different story if this was like a New England Free Jacks situation. You know what I mean? Where there's no where the fullback depth is a little bit lower. You know what I mean? But you have really notable names here where you're like, okay, how is Karoy going to find himself into the lineup? And it's going to be difficult to do that. So I stand on the same side as you. As I if you want to maybe throw a dart, like a shot in the dark, and maybe if you have the space, pick him up. Obviously, bench space is at a premium, but who knows? Like we've seen crazier things happen in the MLR, and imagine, you know, I could read it right now or see it happening where in round 16 in your championship final, Villamone Karoy starts in the lineup and puts up 30 points. You know, it's the way it goes. But the guy that I will suggest is Max Schumacher. This is kind of a cheeky fly half play in here if you want to maybe have a potential fly half option in the future on a pretty solid team. Obviously, Max Schumacher right now is only back three eligible, but he now does have 2 fly half appearances on the season. So with that being said, is there the opportunity for him to gain fly half eligibility after this week, and then you see him at maybe a fullback position or winger bouncing in and out there and forth? So again, kind of a way, if you have a void at the fly half position, Schumacher could be that guy that kind of does that. We don't know the status of Davy Kutzer. Are they a better team with AJ Alatimu? You could argue that as well. But again, if Max Schumacher can just fit in one more fly half appearance, he gets that eligibility. And if he moves back to the back three, then so be it. But we're at that time of the year where there's only a handful of fantasy matchups left to go. And you know, if he would be better option than some of these other guys like Tim Swiel or things like that, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I'll go with, I don't know how I feel about Max Schumacher. I'll go with Cooper Coates. I think he was, before he was kind of out for a long period of time, he was a guy that we were definitely watching, and he seems to be explosive enough, very similar almost to like Duncan Matthews type or Drew Wild type, to where he can just get you those meters gained and get you some points. So I like him, but again, it's a lot of back threes have been rostered and picked up and are on teams right now. Yeah.
And as we preach, defensive set piece, punt it. That is the meta right now in terms of that until we add some other categories that we may see here in the future. All right, let's talk ahead here and get towards the tail end of the show of talking of what's to come here in week 13.
Rucking Rundown.
Close week for the boys here in week 12 when it came to predicting. In last week's Rucking Rundown. We'll see how we do this week. But Vandy and myself go 3, 2, 1. Maddie, you go 2, 3, and 1. We have our first tie of the year in that 26-26 match between Seattle and LA. So It was bound to happen at some point, but now Vandy is still in the lead, 38-22-1. I am 33-27-1, and Maddie, you're still looking to get to above 500
Hey, I'm
at
taking
26-34-1. That is true. I will give you that. All right. Well, like I said, on bye this week, DC, from a fantasy sense, we'll be able to break down that match and predict that match next week on the next edition of the Fantasy Ruckers Show on episode 154. But until then, let's talk about the matches we have leading up to that point. Again, no midweek matches this week.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say before we get into it, right? I mean, we're looking at the schedule just overall. It's Fridays, Saturday, and then the Monday match, like you said earlier in the show. This is going to be a tough one for fantasy managers. Like, this is going to be a tough one, especially if you're relying heavily on Utah, Seattle guys. You're wondering what that lineup is, and that lineup is not coming out until Sunday.
Yeah,
and that is after all the other guys. So you have to make
that
decisions
is true.
And hoping. So, Godspeed to all the fantasy managers, including us. But it'll be a tough one, and some tough decisions will have to be made. So make sure to use your flex spots wisely.
Yes, yeah, and I guess that's a good point to put the guys that are playing earlier into those positional spots. Leave that flex spot open, so in case you have to pivot last minute, you can do so. I will say, as my one piece of advice to add to that, Maddie, is that if you're on the fence between two guys, that could be the deciding factor for me. Like if I have a Jordan Trainer or let's say a Xavier McNo. You know what I mean? Like, I might go McNo in that. I like playing Trainer, but like, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be in the lineup on Monday. Sure. Who knows? And you just got to be comfortable with that. But let's get into it. Let's start on that Friday here. NOLA taking on Miami at home, Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. It should be a fun matchup. I think NOLA's on the up. Miami has been on the up. I'll throw out that game against Chicago in what was a torrential downpour. So this one should be interesting. Now, in terms of who I think I've been more high on going up, I think NOLA has looked very impressive. Impressed me more than Miami has. So for that reason, I'm going to go NOLA.
Yeah, I'll go with that too. I like NOLA here as well.
Any particular plays? I will say, I think I like seeing Santiago Videla back in the lineup. I think he can have a sneaky good game this one on the Miami side.
I think it's going to be high scoring. So, I mean, look at the backs like JP Duplessis, Isaac Tatamaki could all go off. Xavier Mignot and whoever's at 15 for NOLA could definitely go off. And Videla, I hope Kabisha's back because I think Kabisha could also do well here.
All right, we fast track to Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern time. The New England Free Jacks take on the Chicago Hounds in the best of the East matchup that could drastically shift who sits atop of the Eastern Conference after this one. Chicago, a little bit lackluster. New England, been on the up and up. It should be interesting. It should be very interesting on how these two teams clash. New England is at home. And the way that they've been playing, I can't bet against these guys right now. New England, I think, is going to take this one, and Chicago's struggles will continue here, despite squeaking a win against Miami last week.
Yeah, I'll go with New England Free Jacks as well. I just think that they're up for the battle, and they're up for the battle of physicality, and I think that they'll be able to equally control Chicago at the point of contact as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. All right, 10 p.m. now, two matches at 10 p.m. I guess we'll start off with the one that will be on ESPN2. The San Diego Legion at home taking on the Houston Sabercats. Houston coming off of a tough loss against the New England Free Jacks, and then San Diego, obviously the big time win over NOLA. This one's interesting because it's like, have you bought into San Diego yet? Because they were struggling not too long ago. Houston, we were so high on them. They seem to be on opposite trajectories right now. And who's going to have the bounce back game, or who's going to continue that going forward? I think San Diego has the advantage being home. But I hate picking against Houston, and San Diego always sketches me out. So, Maddie, why don't you pick first here?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Houston. I'm not sure how I feel about San Diego. I don't know how confident I am in San Diego, but I feel like I feel a little bit more confident in Houston. Both sides have struggled in their own right, but I'm going to go with Houston here.
All right, and I'll take on San Diego here just to play devil's advocate in that one. All right, LA RFC taking on Anthem RC. I guess we'll get into the betting segment, but like this could be a rout.
Ooh, yeah, it could be interesting. I mean, I actually think Anthem is going to have some sort of offensive power here. I just think they're not going to be able to keep up.
Okay, then let's go on to the last matchup on Monday. Utah taking on Seattle. Talk about a tough one here. LA, Seattle competing for that last playoff spot in the West. LA gets Anthem. Seattle gets Utah. Again, we don't know what Utah lineup is going to be coming out, and they are just coming off of a loss, a tough loss against DC. But either way, Utah is at top of the West right now, and you can't argue with that. Either way, I think I'm going to go after Utah on this one. I imagine with the extended rest, Seattle has looked better.
Yeah, when you think about it, they've had, I guess, 2 weeks, basically. A lot of the starters have had rest. Guys like Liam Coleman, guys like D'Angelo Leila, guys like Jordan Trainer, Joe Mono. These guys have had a elongated rest. They have been able to recover, and I think they're going to come out strong against the Seattle side.
All right, both of us going Utah, and you can probably imagine we'll get Vandy's picks in, but you can probably guess who he's going to be picking in this one as well. But speaking of picks between Vandy and myself, not too shabby of a week. Not the best, not the worst, but hey, we do like making money here on the Fantasy Ruckers Show.
TFR Betting Challenge.
All right, time for a TFR Betting Challenge presented by Betstamp. Betstamp Betting made easy. Check out the link down below to support the show while also getting some free bets at sportsbooks available in your area if you are a new user. Really, really cool link there. Really helps you curate and know what sportsbooks are available in your geolocated area. You got to find out and discover ones that you didn't even know existed. I've been hopping on the Fanatics train recently because did not know it existed in Pennsylvania, and they do have some good lines.
And right, it's big playoff sports time right now. I know we're a rugby show and we're an MLR show, and we love promoting those MLR bets, but there's a lot of great sports playoffs happenings.
Like picking the Leafs to win the Stanley Cup.
Well, that's a bad bet. That's what you call a bad bet.
Either way, not bad bets this week. It was kind of a topsy-turvy kind of week for Vandy and myself. Vandy is just screeching in the positives there at $2.38. Missed out on the LA underdog pick on the money line. Did get the spread on that one, but missed out on the Utah game, which of course he was going to bet for, but did get back a little bit with that Miami spread. For myself, same situation there as Vandy, and I encourage that the ones who are listening to this and do put money on some of these games that don't follow this advice, but I saw that I did not hit on the Utah game and it made me sad. So I said, you know what? I want to make my money back. So I'm going to do something dumb and try to bet and figure out what's going to happen with the San Diego game. I saw a 7.5 line on San Diego favored over NOLA. And I said, you know what? I'm going to hit that with that lineup. That's why I had me extra sweating this past game when I saw that they may have not done that. That would have made me quite mad, but that pushed me in the positive and beat Vandy this week in the betting challenge at $9 made. But in the totality of the season, Vandy's at $91, almost at $100 this season. I am still at $31. My advice to the people out there, though,
listen that to my
people
lines.
Should follow. Use Matthew's lines is what I'm going to say, is because you're going to find some of these sneaky plays. And this past week, the one that Vandy, both him and I hit on was the RFCLA underdog play plus 5.5 against Seattle. Maddie had them favored as 10.5 favorites in that one. And them coming off an underdog, it just gives you that unbiased opinion on what Maddie thinks of this match, and maybe gives you that deciding factor of, hey, this is actually a really good line with a lot of value. I'm going to place money. Whether or not you think it's a good play or not is lo and behold, but hey, there are going to be some of these value plays that you can find here in the MLR. So starting with that, let's get Maddie's lines in this one. Let's go through all the matches here. NOLA Miami, Maddie, what are we thinking?
Yeah, I mean, NOLA Miami, I think it's hard for me to look at NOLA as not being the favorites here. So I think NOLA here is going to be favored by 5.5. I don't think the spread's going to be too big. Free Jacks versus Chicago. Oh, this is kind of a tough one here. I feel like the books are going to favor Chicago for whatever reason. But from my mind, I think what I'm going to say is I think the Free Jacks are going to be favored. They're the hot team right now. I think the books are going to see that they're the hot team right now. I think it's going to be one of those 2.5 spreads favoring the Free Jacks.
If the Free Jacks are underdogs in that one, I am smashing that. I am smashing that if that's the case.
Yeah, I would too. That's definitely one that would be good. For San Diego, Houston, see another tough one. Another really tough one. I feel like with San Diego coming off the win, the books are going to have San Diego as the favorites. I think they're going to be favored by, again, like it's going to be something like, let's say 5.5 points. And I'm going to say Houston covers. I think Houston covers that. I think Houston's able to cover that. I think it's going to be a tight match. So 5.5 points seems really big to me. If that comes down to 2.5, makes you think a little bit more.
For me, I'm staying away from the match. I feel like that's a match that can go any which way that I have no idea.
Very true.
LA Anthem, Maddie.
Oh,
how big is this line going to be?
I think it's got to be favored 18.5. It's got to be favored 18.5. And honestly, I think Anthem can cover this. I think Anthem can cover simply because RCLA provides opportunities to teams to score, whether that's through discipline, whether it's through lack of defense. They provide opportunities for teams to score. And if Anthem can come out and just try to keep up, then I think they'll be able to stay within 18 or 19 points.
Where's the line where you stay away? Is it 2 scores?
Yeah, I mean, anything below 2 scores, I think probably if it gets down to 12.5, then I'm staying away from that.
Okay. All right. Last one here. Utah, Seattle, Maddie.
Seattle. Utah's got to be favorites here. I think this can be really interesting. I mean, I have a feeling that Utah could end up being favored by something like 10.5 points. And if that's the case, I just think that Seattle can cover that. I just have this feeling that the books are going to give Utah a really big spread here. And I think Seattle has the opportunity to cover that spread if it's over 10 points.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, you know, it's funny because sometimes these books know something that we don't, because there was a 7.5 line against Utah versus DC that looked so spicy. And I was like, I think I got to hammer that, right? Like that's too good to be true.
I said it on the weekend. I said, Ryan, I don't think this is the one.
Yeah,
look at that Utah lineup. I don't think this is the one. I think the books knew. They were trying to tempt people. That's what they were trying to do.
Yeah, and they took my money while doing that. All right, well, hey, those are Maddie's lines. NOLA -5.5, New England -2.5, San Diego -5.5, LA -18.5, and Utah -10.5 favorites. Again, do what you will with those numbers. Compare those to the actual sports books coming out and kind of gauge accordingly. And again, you can cash in on some of those free bets for new users at sportsbooks available in your area by using the link down below, presented and provided to you by Betstamp, who we've partnered with for the TFR Betting Challenge to give our listeners some deals again to make some money here through the MLR. Yeah, Maddie, another fun show. 153 in the books. Again, I feel like we've been nonstop for the past couple of weeks with these midweek games. Don't have any midweek games this one, but we do have Monday Night Rugby coming up. So we'll then see you then after that matchup. And then we'll have a Tuesday matchup right after that. So the craziness continues here on the Fantasy Rucker Show with only 2 weeks left here in the Fantasy MLR season. Maddie, anything else you have for the people?
Nothing. Just fantasy managers, get ready. This Monday night's about to throw a wrench in all the decisions you're about to make.
A big, big wrench indeed. All right. For Matt Yee, for Devin Vandy Vanderpool, I am Ryan Yee. We'll see you next week on another episode of the Fantasy Rucker Show.
It's Monday night.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.